Welcome to this amazing conversation that we are going to have as a LEAPS team. My name is Lavenda Ochieng. I am a research assistant at the Africa Research and Impact Network, and I warmly welcome you all to this conversation. So ideally, just to start us off, I will be your moderator for this session. And as you all know, in case you saw the poster that we had made and the brief that we had shared with the team. This conversation will be tied around looking at the effectiveness of the gender-based violence interventions that the country, Kenya, has put in place, and how really can they be strengthened or upscaled to ensure that the GBV survivors really are protected and are in line with the policies that the country has put in place. So just to briefly start us off, we will have a 2 hours discussion starting from opening remarks, which we will get from our amazing speaker. Then we'll move briefly to keynote speaker, then look at the amazing panelists that we have tackling various subtopics or sub-themes within this topic, and also move to the Q&A session and briefly synthesize all these and finally close this conversation. So without further ado, I think I'd mention my name once more. My name is Lavenda. I would love to request people who joined with the link that I shared. You are coming as Lavenda, so probably look into that and maybe rename yourself. Okay, you may rename yourself in case you joined with the link that I shared. Otherwise, those who joined with the link that they had registered with, feel free to just tell us where you're joining us from in the chat section. So briefly, I'll welcome Dr. Isaiah from ARIN. Dr. Isaiah is a research associate at ARIN to kindly give us an opening remark before we start this conversation. Dr. Isaiah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lavenda, for this opportunity. So at this juncture, I would like to welcome all of us to this amazing conversation. As you know, GBV is one of the contentious topics that requires utmost attention. So you that you've joined us on this conversation, we really appreciate you. And for the 2 hours that we are going to be here, we hope that the conversation around this matter will be able to open your eyes and even to challenge you to see the survivors of GBV as part of our community and support them in moving on with their lives. So without much ado, I would like to welcome all of us to this conversation. Maybe just by mention, we are here a team from ARIN. We are a number, and some of us are on the way coming. So in due course, feel much welcome, and we seek to offer you any support that you may need to understand this subject. So once again, I warmly welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you. Over to you, Laventa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. Thank you for welcoming us in. Dr. Akinyi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Hello, Lavenda. Yes, I'm here.
Over to you, kindly. Give us
Thank you very much.
on the LEAPS program, and then we start this conversation.
Thank you very much. Greetings, colleagues, and I'm honored to once again reiterate or emphasize what Dr. Marquette has just mentioned, that we welcome all of you to this webinar, which is an essential forum dedicated to addressing one of the most pressing human rights issues of our time, and that is gender-based violence. And today, as we gather here as part of the dissemination pathways of the learning together to advance evidence and equity in policy making for achieving sustainable development goals, in short, LEAPS. LEAPS is a project that is implemented by several partners, including Makerere University, AFIDEP, and ARIN. So as the fellowship manager at ARIN, I am proud to be part of this initiative that not only prioritizes rigorous research, but also in a way champions the translation of evidence into impactful, equitable policy and practice. So on to the topic. We have taken note as Kenyans that the country has made commendable strides in enacting some frameworks, legal frameworks, such as the Sexual Offences Act, and many other policies intended to safeguard the rights of gender-based violence survivors. However, despite these enactments, there's still the problem of GBV that still persists, and the barriers that survivors face underscore the critical truth, which is policy on paper must actually transform into tangible protection and empowerment on the ground. So survivors often encounter systemic challenges, including stigmatization, limited access to justice, inadequate health care, inadequate psychosocial support, all those, name them. So these challenges not only perpetuate cycles of abuse, but they also hinder the broader social and economic progress that are aimed to be achieved through sustainable development goals. So as a project, the LEAPS as a project embodies that collective commitment to bridging the gaps that have been identified as far as GBV is concerned. So through learning together, we in a position to harness diverse perspectives and disciplines, generating evidence that is as robust as it is contextually relevant. And this evidence, we hope, is supposed to be designed to be both equitable and effective, ensuring that the interventions are responsive to the nuanced realities of survivors. So important to note is that the project's work is not isolated because it is integrally linked to the achievement of critical SDGs such as SDG 5, SDG 3, SDG 16. So by advancing evidence and equity in policy making, we're hoping that LEAPS as a project can ensure that our efforts contribute to a broader agenda of sustainable development, where every individual, regardless of gender, is empowered to lead a life free from violence. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, today's dialogue is a call to action, a call to all of us as stakeholders, from researchers and policymakers, to commit to a collaborative process of learning and transformation. So we hope that through these discussions that we're about to have, we're going to be able to have a very productive discussion that will drive meaningful and evidence-based change for GBV survivors across the country. With those few remarks, I welcome all of us to this discussion, and I encourage all of us to be active participants. Thank you, and karibuni sana. Over to you, Lavender.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akinyi, for those insightful remarks. There's really highlight what really LEAPS entail and what we're trying to achieve in looking at how evidence can be scaled up in every policy decision space. Thank you so much, Dr. Akinyi. And yeah, as Akinyi said, welcome, and we make this as engaging and as impactful as possible. So without further ado, I will welcome Ms. Ann Ninsima. Ms. Ann is the LEAPS gender person. She is actively involved in training and mentoring our fellows on issues of JC, that is the gender equity and social inclusion, and how evidence can be informed within the various sectors, looking at how JC and evidence can really interact and inform policies that are really inclusive. Ms. Ninsima or Ms. Anna, if you can hear me, over to you, please. You have 25 minutes.
Thank you so much, Lavender. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Just put the PowerPoints in presentation mode, then we continue.
Okay. Yeah, so
Great.
thank you so much, Lavenda. And I'm Dr. Anna Ninsima from Makerere University. I teach gender studies at Makerere, and I'm part of the LEAPS project with AFIDEP and Irene and the rest of the other teams. I'm happy to be here. Nice to hear from you, Dr. Kinyi, Dr. Isaiah, and the rest of the team. So here to talk about let's see, what is this? Yeah, so we are talking about the effective interventions of GBV. I want to start by showing us, I'm going to put my video just for a short while so that people can see who is speaking. And for purposes of avoiding internet disconnection, I will probably remove it after you have seen me, and then we can proceed. Okay. So when we talk about gender-based violence, quite often we think of physical violence, yet it has different forms. It takes different forms. Yes, there is physical, which we know best, maybe the most harmful as we know, but there are even others which are equally harmful. Economic violence, emotional violence, sexual violence, verbal violence, and some of these can actually overlap. For example, economic can lead to emotional. It just can't. It's not just it can, but it does lead to emotional violence. Sexual leads to both emotional and economic violence. Verbal can be sexual, so they are interlinked in a way. But we need to know that there's some aspects that we call economic violence. For example, if somebody is stopped from working, from doing certain kind of work, or if they cannot have independence to use the income the way they would want to use it, or there are many other issues related to economic violence. And emotional violence is such a terrible form of violence that can actually lead to devastative effects. So we cannot underrate what's happening, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. So gender-based violence is not just any violence, but it is that violence that happens or is targeted to a person or an individual just because of their gender. So UNICEF reports that more than 370 million girls and women experienced rape or sexual assault. These are before the age of 18. It was in the year 2024. And this does not include verbal or online violence. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, 79 million girls and women were affected by sexual violence. But in general, the World Bank reports that 42% of women and girls experience physical or sexual violence. I mean, we cannot ignore such. It's a big number to ignore. In Kenya, gender-based violence is estimated at 47%. You can imagine that this is almost half the population experiencing gender-based violence. The rates of teenage pregnancies are quite high. Forced marriages are quite high. Maybe girls who are being trafficked to the United Arab Emirates is not a big deal in Kenya, but it's a big deal in your neighboring country here. This is all violence. It's really violence. Some people are denied chance to do public work, but also those who are in the public work actually experience violence, which is sometimes silent. But we also have intersectionality in terms of the disabled, the minorities, the kind of violence, you find that the different forms of violence intersecting and facing just one person. So violence is costly. It not only reproduces violence in terms of the future generations or cause only permanent disability, but it is also fatal. Most times you find a mother has died because of violence, but also maybe the unborn child is dying because of violence, or having permanent disabilities and any other health issues as a result of violence. We have increased cases of mental health, not just among women or even those who are facing violence, but we also have them among adolescents. We are having increased number of mental cases. I'm not saying this is the only cause, but this is a large and big contributor towards mental cases, because children find it hard to see the people they love most, particularly in homes. If the people they love most don't love each other, the children get traumatized. So we are getting large and quite a number of cases of mental cases as a result of gender-based violence. It doesn't stop there. It affects productivity. It affects productivity, it affects economic stability, and this continues the cycle. So in other words, as you talk of improving the GDP, of improving productivity, you have this evil, which is actually also constraining that ability to reach where you want. So it's a cost. It's such a cost that we shouldn't ignore. What has been done? There's a lot that has been done. We have so many legal documents and conventions and, so we cannot complain of not having a framework really. We have the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. I don't think I can finish them, but let me just list some. We have the UN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the African Union's protocol, that's the Maputo Protocol, the 2005 Convention on Actions Against Trafficking in Human Beings, the Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, that's the Istanbul Convention. But we also have at national level, we have our constitutions, which are specific actually. We have laws. Some of our countries, I think Kenya has a law against domestic violence. Uganda has a law against domestic violence. We have, and other forms of GBV. We have policies, we have guidelines, we have the documentation and the legal framework. I'm saying that we really have enough in terms of the policy framework, in terms of the legal framework. We have enough. And I think one of us just mentioned that most times we say that this is becoming a song. We say, oh, we have the laws, but the implementation, and sometimes I just don't want to say the word. So why does GBV persist? There is normalization of GBV, both at home, in communities, but also at the workplace. I want to tell you a story of my cousin sister that I asked. I asked her why she accepts to be battered. And she told me, she gave me two answers. She said, one, that her mother-in-law is battered. So who is she? If her mother-in-law is battered, then who is she to kind of resist? Two, she said, if I leave this home, can I come to your house with my children? So there are two scenarios here. One is the normalization of the abnormal. Two is having no choice. So these are two important issues. That one, there is some level of normalizing. If others are going through it, then how about, I mean, what's wrong? But then there's also this aspect of where do I go? So there is fear of reporting because of the repercussions in terms of where do I go? The dependence. So when I report, what happens after that? Okay. And that is as a result of the dependency. The fact that this person is so dependent on this other one. So they don't see any other option. They don't see a choice. But then there are also norms. The normalization that this is actually normal. The normalization that if I do this, it's wrong, and therefore I should be punished for it. Okay? But also there's an issue of what is happening within the justice system. The justice system's inability to apprehend and prosecute perpetrators. It more or less becomes like if somebody impregnated someone's daughter, but nothing actually happened to them, or when they were taken to police, they were there for one night. So what stops others from doing it actually? So it is like the inability of our justice systems is a big blow. It's a big challenge that no one is held accountable, and so the others may not be able to learn. But also we have issues with the lengthy court systems and procedures, not just lengthy, but they involve costs. There's a time I was doing my PhD actually, my PhD fieldwork. And so I was being told in the community how perpetrators of GBV are taken to police and are released in 1 day or two. And so how the community gets tired of even reporting. So they now decide to handle these cases informally at home. Maybe talk to the perpetrator, they give you some money, and you can see where that is heading to. So it means that we are not solving the problem, but you are actually, how would you call it? You are enhancing it. But when I went to the police to ask what is happening, of course, we know that the process is quite long, but the police First of all, I was very angry because I was coming from the community and I already had this perspective that the police is actually not helping the people. And so when I asked, they were telling me that, you see, they don't have cars, they don't have fuel, they don't have, and I was like, you don't have cars? And one of them asked me, how many did you find out there? Even if you found it there, if you found it there, it is possible that that is a traffic car. But even if you found it there, do we have fuel? So there's this kind of blame game that is happening, but also the files that they had at the police required certain amount of money to be taken through the process to the court. And of course, also the police reported how they do not have the health centers where they could take the victims or the survivors to be checked if in case of rape or defilement. Because if they took them to the hospital, they needed money, and most times the survivors don't have it. So you clearly see that the lengthy court process needs transport for the survivors and their families to keep coming. It involves very high costs, and sometimes you need a lawyer. So justice, it seems to be for sale. And when justice is for sale, it means that those who can afford will be able to get the justice, and those who cannot will not be able to. So in most of your papers and your reports, you start by writing that globally, the disease burden is this, or gender-based violence is this, or early pregnancy, or maternal mortality. And then at the end, we say, in sub-Saharan Africa, so sub-Saharan Africa normally has the highest. That is how we normally write, isn't it? So sub-Saharan Africa will have high rates of GBV, will have high rates of disease burden, will have high rates of early pregnancy, maternal mortality, and HIV. So I think we need to ask ourselves, why have these challenges remained the same? Or if there's a change, it is so minimal. Why? Why is this happening? What is so specific to sub-Saharan Africa that we need to actually have a honest discussion about? I want to argue that in sub-Saharan Africa, there is institutional failure. So as we look at effective interventions, which is what brings us here, we need to analyze how our institutions have failed. Institutional failure, partly as a result of internal challenges, but also partly as a result of neoliberal policies. The role of the state cannot be ignored if we are to ensure strong and accountable institutions for an effective referral system. So kicking out the role of the state, having states sleep on the job, we cannot have a strong and accountable referral system, or we cannot talk of an effective referral system. I've talked about the police, we have the health system, we have a judicial system, and all the other interconnected institutions that must be interconnected, that must be part of these interventions. So as long as these institutions are not strengthened, it becomes very difficult to talk of effective interventions for gender-based violence. So we find ourselves with no effective referral system. You find we do not have enough police surgeons, no cars, no fuel, so many things that you could talk about in different countries. So we need to strengthen institutions. We need to strengthen the police as a critical player in dealing with gender-based violence. The health system, the judicial system, the LC system, the local community systems, you know, all these need to be addressed. And it becomes difficult when we do not strengthen institutions and assume that when we target individual people, that we are going to solve a problem. So I argue that we have tended to target individuals. I am talking about women because that's what we have largely done. And we largely talk about women because the figures show that even when men face gender-based violence, I think women tend to face more in terms of the figures that we get. But we have targeted women as individuals, for example, with political representation. I really think that it is critical and very important to have them, but sometimes we overburden them because having them represented or having women represented without addressing the environment, without addressing the institutions that have failed, is overburdening these women. So they are not likely to change what is around them because the institutions will fail them. In that case, therefore, we seem to be dealing with symptoms, but not the root cause of the problem. We have done a lot of sensitization. We have so many organizations working on gender-based violence. And we have done a lot of sensitization, but we have not provided the services. We have not addressed the referral system that I've been talking about. We have not addressed the healthcare system. We have not put the safety nets. Remember my cousin's sister? She has no option but to stay in an abusive relationship. There are no safety nets. So in other words, our sensitization is very important, but it cannot be effective because we have addressed the individual persons, but we have not addressed the bigger problem, which is institution and service delivery. I want to say that as we ask ourselves what is happening in sub-Saharan Africa, what is so common that every problem tends to delight itself? I want to say that poverty is a real evil. It is a real evil. And economic empowerment is very, very critical. But as I said, when we want to do this and we target individuals, then we end up failing to actually realize the fruits from what we are doing. We give people loans or we give them economic activities, but we don't address the environment. What happens is that the money we give them ends up paying school fees and going to pay healthcare bills. So the money we give them, because we think that this is going to be economic empowerment and therefore they're going to do an economic activity, does not address that we have given them for. It addresses something else that we could have actually solved. So capacity building without addressing the constraining environment can actually not produce results. I'm going to take shorter time than you gave me. So what is my message? That economic independence is very key. As individuals and as nations, strengthening the healthcare system, education and training is very, very important. Very critical, because these are institutions that transform human beings from generation to generation. I want to believe that what my parents were able to entertain or accept I am not likely to. Why? Because I have been enlightened. I also have some economic muscle. And I sometimes think that I have a choice to make than that one who may not have a choice to make. So we need to have systems in place that will give people the ability to make a choice. And so the question is, should we fix individuals, women and girls, or should we fix institutions? And that is Livia Chant, if you want to read more. Should we fix women and girls, or should we fix institutions? Because the worry is that when we see a problem, say, oh, so what is the issue with the GBV? Or it's because these people are dependent economically. So what do? Let's give them economic activities. Or why is it this? Or it's because they don't have information. So what do? We prepare, we sensitize them on what GBV is and how they should not accept GBV. But wait a minute. Yes, I have information that I should not accept GBV, but do I have the ability? So that is the question that we need to ask ourselves. And therefore, I conclude by saying that we need to craft a multi-component approach, but majorly looking towards strengthening institutions if we are to talk about effective interventions for gender-based violence, whether we are in Kenya, whether we are in Nigeria, or whether we are in Congo. Thank you very much, and I beg to stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari, for those highlights. Indeed, when we need to do something, we really need to address an issue or something, we really need to look at the root cause rather than looking at the individual perception, or rather what we need to do at individual level. Thank you so much. So institutional failure is a key challenge in prioritizing issues of GBV, and in order to address them, we need to focus on that. And that's actually what LEAP's program really advocates for, institutionalization of every aspect of policy. Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. At this point, I'll welcome Alphonse. I think he's stepping in for Dr. Rosolayo, who is currently a bit engaged and not having time to join us. So Alphonse will join us and probably take us through the brief findings that they did. This was a study that was done by a group of 10 individuals. Of course, it was purely peer-reviewed paper, but Alphonse will just take us through the findings, what they got, and how effective can these systems be strengthened through the recommendation. Alphonse, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lavender, for the introduction, and also the other speakers that have come before me. Kindly, would you please share this? Okay, thank you. Briefly, I'll just go through what we got from that exercise, that is through the LEAP's training, and also those who are joining us, I'd like to, those who are interested, to also get to know or join these sessions so that we can learn more. So for these effective interventions in protection of GBV survivors in Kenya, and also maybe replicating it to other parts of the region, the continent. Yeah. So just as the previous speakers talked about, the GBV is actually, it's a global public health problem, as well as a violation of human rights. It is also important to note that we are not falling short of the policies, laws, or guidelines. I can point out that recently in Kenya, we had the president announce that we will be having a technical working group to address to end GBV and also femicide, since femicide has been on the rise on the recent past in Kenya. So we have to understand that we are not falling short of the laws, guidelines, policies, but it is actually how we put it in practice, implementation, so as to get the optimum outcomes from the policies that we have. It is also important to know that many survivors of GBV do not report their experiences, and we have a case from the previous speaker. And also to know that the challenges go through in terms of reporting. They have legal cost implications, and most of the victims or survivors are unable to report this or take the legal way or legal way to address these issues because they have maybe the socio-economic backgrounds, poverty, and also the cultural practices, as well as the gender norms that inhibit survivors from seeking help. Also, we have a study from DOCA, and most of this, the GBV is actually perpetrated by the people that they know or intimate partner violence. We can see that non-partner sexual violence actually accounted for in the study 3%, whereas the intimate partner violence contributed was 18% to this GBV. So it is actually important to understand that the perpetrators are actually those that are known to the victims and the survivors. So what was the aim of, or the question that we had for this brief? Is how effective are the gender-based violence strategies or interventions in protection of survivors in Kenya? And from this, we sought to understand the strategies and interventions therein in protecting the survivors, also to assess the effectiveness of current measures as far as identifying the measures that are there and also areas of improvement. Also, from this brief, we can get that this information can help us or can help inform development of more robust policies, strategies, and interventions to enhance the protection of GBV survivors. That is by having incremental changes into these policies so as they target actually the practical bit of implementing the actions against or mitigating GBV as a vice. So the methodology that we had, we conducted literature search to obtain relevant articles from PubMed and Google Scholar for grey literature, and also including government policies on GBV. Keywords were used, and the keywords that we used were prevention, protection, domestic violence, GBV, SDBV, intimate partner relations, violence, survivors, interventions, and also the effectiveness and also the approaches towards that. And we use the Boolean operators to combine the search terms. And from that, we got the final articles that we reviewed were actually 21 peer-reviewed journals. And from that is where we found or we peg our findings. Also, we use the thematic approach, that is an analysis across all the articles that we, and also we use to help us synthesize the findings. Also excluding using the inclusion criteria, as well as getting those that didn't meet our inclusion criteria were excluded. So the findings, so the challenges that we get from the intervention that are there. We found that lack of information and knowledge on essential services by survivors, such as the clinical management teams, that is the healthcare services, on how to handle the rape and also communicate, also mental health and psychological support services that these survivors actually need. So the lack of knowledge of the legal frameworks and policies on GBV at the national county levels came out as a factor that the survivors or the victims actually do not know, or the extent that if they report this, how are they going to be helped? And also the other issues that come up with this being a survivor or being a victim, such as psychological issues and mental health issues, which they actually need support. The previous speaker has talked of institutional issues or institutional challenges or institutional failures as the key challenge that we have, as much as we want to end the gender-based violence. So the institutions have the inability of the criminal justice systems to apprehend and prosecute the perpetrators is actually a challenge. And from the papers that we are reading, we find that someone goes to report, the victim goes to report, but they're actually ridiculed. That now they bear the blame on why they expose themselves, or they're actually contributing to them being assaulted or having to be battered, or whether by their partners or their spouses. Also, in terms of the healthcare facilities as an institution, they lack adequate resources, knowledge and skills on collection and lab processing of forensic evidence, as well as equipment used in the collection and processing of forensic evidence. I'll want to invite us and ask and pose a question. In the health facilities, we have this gender-based GBVR. How many of us have actually tried to go there and also just try to get to know what they actually do? We find that actually it is somehow secluded in the facilities, or they are actually silent departments. So I think that is where some of the challenges that we have. And as much as they are there, they might not be actively or optimally being utilized to help the victims and survivors, and also help in ending the vice. Also, we have the intersectoral collaboration as a challenge. We have the inadequate referral pathways between different sectors. For example, we have the police, the healthcare, and also the justice services, criminal justice systems, as well as the social services. If a victim has been raped, for instance, where should they start with? If they go to the hospital, they are being told to go to the police. The police might tell them go to the healthcare facility first. So I think having that streamlined way of collaborating, these sectors will help in actually improving or leading into the optimum utilization, and also actually addressing the issue at hand. Also, we have the legal systems. For example, the judiciary, you find that they are underfunded, and they have the resources are limited, and through this, the resources are constrained, and therefore they lack the capacity to deal with the GBV cases adequately. And you find that these cases are dragged and also take a long time, which poses cost implication to the victim or survivor, as well as psychological and mental issues, dragging a case for a long time, and yet this is something that actually happened to them. The slow operation of the courts sometimes leads to witness tampering and repeat offenses by perpetrators. So we had, like, for a study that from July 2020 onwards, we found that after the post-COVID, we found that there was a backlog in court cases, also processing, and also coming to determination of such cases. Other challenge is the economic challenge. We have the budgetary allocations towards the GBV funding, and supporting victims is inadequate and not easily available to government institutions, such as the Department of Gender and Affirmative Action. So I think if you look at the Kenyan budgets and ask ourselves, in a budget of 3 trillion, what percentage goes into GBV? So also we have social factors, which are cultural factors and stigma, are key barriers to the uptake to gender-based violence and recovery services, and also how to deal with these cases of defilement, rape by close relatives, has been noted as a key deterrent to the utilization of GBVR services. And also sometimes you find that most of the times in the communities, these issues are actually done under the tree, where the perpetrators are more represented, like the male gender. The males are more have a larger representation, and when the victim or the survivor goes there, they're actually being ridiculed, or they're actually at fault, or they're being told that actually they have to just drop those cases. Also, we have the community-based challenges. Community mobilization to prevent violence can lower acceptance of IPV among women and greater acceptance that women can diffuse sex. Okay, now the key recommendations and actions from our review, or for this brief. We should have the stakeholder engagement should be strengthened to sensitize all stakeholders, including the community and other implementing actors of GBV on GBV policies. On these stakeholders should be involved in the process of creating and also implementing the GBV related policies and strategies. This is ensuring that the implementation bit actually is contextualized to fit into this within different sectors, and also having that collaborative agreement and co-designs of these implementation strategies will help a lot in ensuring that we have a clear path into addressing this. Also, we have to build capacity of healthcare providers. This is since the quality of care should be improved through capacity building to provide providers to offer GBVR services. If we ask ourselves, what are these activities or services that the healthcare providers should offer? You find that at the same instant a victim goes there, you find that maybe they might be turned away by the same healthcare providers that are actually supposed to offer them the service. Also ensuring that community awareness and engagement with the GBVR services, that is ensuring that we have an active participation of local community in planning, implementing, and monitoring interventions is also crucial. That is involving the local administration. We have these informal leaders, either the village elders, we have the chiefs, we have for example, the Nyumba Kumi in Kenya. Yeah, so that inclusivity would actually go away in ensuring that we actually fight back and also reduce these instances. Also, providing information. We have the lack of basic information on GBV services, which prevents many survivors from seeking care. Also, we have the education of providers and legal officers. More so, the police. Here we have we found that we have a challenge in terms of the reporting and also being on the know. Sometimes you find that they are not those actually police officers that actually are mandated to handle these GBV services. You find that just the general reporting and nothing is actually comes out of it in terms of addressing this and also justice to the victims. Also, as a key recommendation is also have to strengthen the collaboration and service linkage structures among multisectoral networks to ensure that the effective referral systems can strengthen collaboration among stakeholders. Also, to end that recommendation bit is the economic protection can prevent and respond to GBV by addressing economic insecurity of survivors, softening economic hardships, easing financial tensions, and increasing survivor autonomy. That's by creating empowerment opportunities to survivors. From this brief, what are the policy priorities? Is to integrate holistic approach of combining GBV prevention and response services into a unified and comprehensive program. Also, we need to have develop linkages and strengthen existing ones in order to improve the uptake of GBV services. So, in conclusion, is that synergies at the highest level of planning can be used to create a clear mandate for coordinating GBV services. Also, we need to conduct a mixed method and comparative and longitudinal studies that can contribute to the development of conceptual frameworks, bridging GBV and social protection, and apply theories of GBV protection. We find that GBV and social protection, they are actually, in terms of implementation, find that they are in silos, but we feel that with that, bridging in the gap and also making them into close relation can also go ahead in solving these issues. Also, GBV against men, as a finding, is that it's also something that is emerging and also it's on the rise. To end with, we have to also integrate an intersectional lens in research and policy designs on social protection schemes for victims and survivors of GBV, and also identify gaps and opportunities for increased collaboration among stakeholders on GBV to put pressure on policymakers, implementers to move to a more evidence-based approach in addressing gender-based violence issues. The key takeaway from the brief was the GBV in Kenya is a pervasive and significant issue that affects individuals across various demographics. And also we understand that the government, there are ongoing efforts by the government, the NGOs, and also other international bodies in fighting back or solving this. And we have actually recently one of the key partners or donors, that is the USAID, pulling out. So we have to ask ourselves, what actually the government should actually do or improve on, since they have been funding and also major activities. Also, some of the recommendations in addressing the gaps include to sensitize all stakeholders, including the community and implementing actors. So many thanks, and thank you for listening to me. Tried to rush through the presentation. So over to you, Lavender.
Thank you so much, Alphonse, for that. Those highlights you put across, looking at the brief that you developed. And in case someone has a question regarding to this brief, we will share it with you. It's already uploaded on the RIN's website as well as the AFIDEP website. We will share it with the participants as well, so that you get a clear data or a clear evidence on what really is happening currently and what needs to be done differently. Thanks so much, Alphonse, once more. And yeah, at this juncture, we're going to have some few discussion amongst our panelists. We have two panelists here. In case you have a question or comment, kindly just feel free to put in the chat section. We have a session that we will be tackling that and addressing all the questions that any participant or all our participants are having. So at this point, I'll welcome our first panelist. That is just a minute. Our first panelist is Dr. Esther Mulo from Gender Department, State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action in Kenya. Dr. Mulwa is a trained counseling, psychology, and conflict management person with over 15 years of experience in this sector. So Dr. Mulwa, I'll just welcome you briefly. Kindly take us through your presentation. Let us know what the government is currently doing and what exactly are the current systems that are really being put in place in order to protect the GBV survivors in Kenya. Dr. Mulwa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Lavenda, for this opportunity that you've provided to me. Let me show my face so that you can be able to put name on it.
And you may share the screen in case you have slides. Feel free to share them.
Are you able to see my face?
Yes, we can see your face.
Yes, that is me.
Though we can see it at an angle, probably look at your camera. We can only see from your nose. All right, that's better.
That's me. And I wish to pull it down so that now we can move on. Like you've heard, my name is Dr. Esther Muller. I work for the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. And that is a government department, which is a department in the Ministry of Gender, Culture, the Arts, and Heritage. Let me share my screen. Are you able to see?
No, we can't see it. Okay, it's coming.
Coming. That is my screen.
All right, put in the presentation mode and you have 20 minutes.
Okay. Yes. Is it clear now?
Yes, we can continue.
Okay. Like I've said, my name is Dr. Esther Muller from the Ministry of Gender, Culture, the Arts, and Heritage. State Department for Gender is a department in that ministry. And for those who are not from Kenya, it is a department that is charged with the coordination of matters gender. And when it is charged with that mandate, it means that GBV is part of the core mandate that the ministry takes lead in coordinating that. And like I have said, I would want to begin my presentation straight away. And my presentation, that I'm supposed to present to you is about how prepared is the government, on protection of gender-based violence survivors. What existing systems? What are the existing systems to protect GBV survivors? And what are the skills do they need, that is the survivors need to rebuild their lives. That is my presentation. And I'll begin with just by giving a context. From the first presentation, or the presenter that we had from the very beginning, tackled issues on GBV from maybe the continental point of view. But I'm just bringing myself home because the ministry or the department coordinates matters, gender, and GBV is part of that. So we are saying that according to KDHS, because that is where we get our reports, that's where our data on issues GBV are analyzed. And I am sure that is not to say that other institutions do not have their own data. They do have, but according to the government, guidelines, that is where we get our data. And the data says that this report shows that women over that 4 women in Kenya have experienced GBV at the age of 15 years, and only 27% have experienced physical violence since the age of 25 years, or since the age of 15 years. Now, we can be able to say that this report shows that GBV in Kenya is prevalent. That is what we can be able to say. And on a report, for example, like I said, I wanted to give a context on a report of prevalence of femicide. We have seen that there is a lot of femicide that is, going on since last year. So many cases of femicide have already been reported within police, everywhere. And even this year, there is femicide. And as a ministry or as a department, we treat femicide as part of GBV because it targets women. That's how we look at it. And therefore, it is very important to know that GBV as a whole, femicide, FGM, those are some of the forms of GBV that we handle as a department. And I don't need to, to dwell so much on this, but it is very important for us to know that in 2020 alone, 47 women were killed, while 3 children also were killed. They were targeted, and this one was, femicide by itself. And as a government or as a State Department for Gender, we cannot coordinate and prevent and respond to GBV alone. We have departments and other ministries or other government ministries that partner with us in prevention and response to GBV, because GBV cuts across and it can affect anyone. So that's why I'm saying that no single government ministry, UN agency, civil society organization can address GBV alone. So we work together. A civil society organization, government agencies, State Department for Gender as a coordinator, and other state actors. So as to how prepared is the government in the protection of GBV survivors? How prepared is the government? Like I've said, the State Department for Gender coordinates matters gender, and GBV is one of them. And therefore we have a constitution, our Kenyan constitution, that was, that is in existence as we speak, 2010. And it says that there should be no discrimination and violence against anyone and several articles and approaches, the issues of violence, the issues of GBV, the way they are. In other words, GBV is a violation of human rights and our constitution. And we can be able to say that every person has the right to live, has a right to get security or to be protected. And therefore, it is very important that we know that Kenyans are protected by the Constitution in as far as gender-based violence or any violation of human rights is concerned. Just to move very fast, also going to see how then is very important for us to, what are these systems that as a government or as a state department, we coordinate, that try to address issues on GBV. Like I said, that GBV is very prevalent. We cannot ignore that fact. What are then these systems that protect the survivors of GBV? One, the government developed sexual gender-based violence strategy a while ago, and this was to accelerate justice for survivors of GBV. And when it was established, it was supposed to curb or to give direction on how to address GBV in Kenya. Sorry for that. Let me go back to it. Yes. Now, this strategy therefore aims to overcome institutional, social, and structural barriers by providing trauma-responsive justice system for survivors of GBV. And we are also saying that we have safe and protective spaces for women, girls, and children, and the creation of safe protective spaces for women, girls, and children is one of such interventions that can have profound impact, not only on reducing the costs, but also ensuring the safety, security, productivity, and empowerment of individuals, families, and communities as a whole that maybe could be affected by GBV. It is very important for us to note that most of the existing spaces are run by civil society. What am I saying about this? I'm saying that we have guidelines. We have guidelines as a country, as a government, that try to give direction on how GBV safe spaces should look like. As a country, we have not yet come up with the safe spaces, but we have guidelines to guide the structure on how GBV spaces safe spaces should look like. And those are the guidelines I'm talking about. So most of the existing spaces are run by civil societies. So you find that most of the safe spaces for survivors of GBV are run by civil society organizations. And they depend on donor funding. As such, then they tend to be short-term and unsustainable. Only saying that the government has not yet come up with safe spaces, but there are, guidelines on how the safe spaces for survivors of GBV should look like. The government has also developed a space model. That is the model I'm talking about, and which offers much needed guidance, like I've said, and it is very important for us to know that it is a national scale and proposes a set of minimum standards which duty bearer should adhere when establishing such centers. So for those civil, organizations or any private sector or private individual that would wish to develop centers for safe spaces for GBV survivors, the guidelines are there for them to be able to follow those guidelines. It is very important to note that. And then you find that safe spaces should be located in places that are conveniently accessible to users at all hours and assure safety and privacy. Those are, how the guidelines should look like. And the government, according to the government executive order, number 2 of 2023, mandates the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action to establish gender violence protection centers for protection of survivors, of GBV survivors. This is a government guideline that mandates the State Department for Gender as an organization that takes lead on matters on prevention and response to gender-based violence. So the process, since this one was brought to existence, there has been process that was initiated so that we can come up with protection centers. Remember, protection centers have to be anchored on a law. So the legal framework is very key so that we can be able to come up with it. So the journey is on. We also have a Protection Against Domestic Violence Act 2015, which is a significant legal framework aimed at protecting survivors of gender-based violence by providing various mechanisms and support systems for survivors. The same act provides protection orders to bar perpetrators from conducting or being in close proximity to the survivor, ensuring safety. So therefore, the act requires health professionals, teachers, social workers, and other key community members to report cases of suspected domestic violence. And this ensures that incidents are brought to attention even if the survivor is hesitant to report such cases. The act as well sets out criminal penalties for perpetrators of domestic violence, and these penalties act as a deterrent and emphasize the seriousness of GBV. Perpetrators who violate protection orders can face legal consequences, including imprisonment. And the act, therefore, criminalizes GBV issues. We also have prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act, which is also very key, and this one focuses on issues to do with the female genital mutilation, which is very prevalent, and especially in counties where such practice is, taken seriously by communities, because female genital mutilation has been, established that it is one of the harmful violation of human rights. And that's why then this law came into being, and it has been used to deter or to prevent the violators of female genital mutilation. And therefore, the law declared FGM illegal in Kenya And you find that law also criminalizes the trafficking of women and girls for the purpose of FGM, because across the borders of Kenya, whether Somalia, whether Uganda or Tanzania, those are the places where our girls or women, if in Kenya the law is very strict, they run to Uganda, they can run to Tanzania and get cut, and then they come back. So this is the law that prevents the survivors of GBV or of FGM from that kind of violation. You also find that due to this law, there has been cultural shifts through this legislation, where the law encourages a shift from viewing FGM as a cultural norm to seeing it as criminal act, and it challenges the belief that FGM is an essential part of cultural identity or rites of passage for women and girls. And the legal consequences serve to undermine the perceived legitimacy of practice within the communities. That law enabled the establishment of an NGO and FGM board. And this board is very key on matters FGM, because it serves as a central body for coordinating efforts to eliminate FGM and provide protection to its survivors. And the FGM board plays a key role in ensuring that the FGM Act is properly implemented and enforced. And therefore, the NGO board works closely with the law enforcement, community leaders, and judiciary to ensure that the law is upheld and the perpetrators of FGM face legal consequences as it is required. So therefore, the board is active and engages with traditional leaders, elders, and religious groups, often seen as key decision makers in our communities where FGM is prevalent. And you find that the involvement of such leaders can be very influential, especially to the communities and their beliefs, so that they can be able to change or shift their beliefs. We also have the Sexual Offences Act 2006 or 2006, and the Act criminalizes a wide range of sexual offenses, as you are aware. And you find that this law has been in existence for a while. And it is very important that the law mandates the survivors of sexual violence the right to immediate medical care, including medical examination, forensic testing, and so on. And we find that this ensures that survivors not only receive appropriate treatment to address physical injuries, but also have access to preventive health services to address the broader impact of sexual violence. We also have, as a country, we also have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act. And this law, is very critical and it's crucial in protecting gender-based violence survivors, particularly in the context of cybercrimes that involve harassment, exploitation, and the abuse of technology. As you know, you are all aware that gender-based violence facilitated GBV is very prevalent in our platform or technology, platform. And you find that now it is very important that this is put in place, at least to prevent or try to reduce a bit of it. And you find that it also spells out offenses acts, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of computer data and systems, including access to authorized information with intent to commit offenses. And therefore, the Act criminalizes various forms of online abuses and provides survivors of GBV in the digital space. We also have witness protection. It seeks to protect dignity of witness through various support services, including health, psychosocial support, legal, and therefore, we have national policy for the eradication of FGM, 2019. And this policy is very key because it aims to provide comprehensive protection for survivors of FGM through various measures that focus on prevention, support, and justice. Survivors can benefit from legal protection against further harm, and the policy supports the prosecution of perpetrators. The policy facilitates, therefore, survivors' access to justice through the legal system, ensuring that they can report their cases of FGM and that appropriate legal action is taken. It also works to ensure that survivors are not further victimized by legal process. We have national policy on prevention and response to gender-based violence, which is under review. This is a policy which is domiciled in the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action, and it is a national policy. And this is the policy that addresses issues on GBV, and it is designed, therefore, to protect survivors of GBV, including femicide, through a multifaceted approach that emphasizes prevention and response and long-term support. And the policy advocates for enforcement of laws that protect survivors of GBV. The policy, therefore, sets up mechanism for effective coordination between government agencies, law enforcement, and judicial bodies to ensure that the survivors of GBV and femicide can access justice. And this includes police protection, legal aid, and improved court procedures for handling GBV. And due to prevalence of femicide in Kenya, on 10th January 2025 this year, the government came up with a technical working group on gender-based violence, including femicide, and it was gazetted. And the purpose of this, technical working group is, for example, to map out the hotspot areas of GBV, to map out the trend of GBV and so on. And therefore, this is one of the, of the initiative that is currently being, implemented by the government. By having this technical working group, the issues of femicide are going to be, to be established. What are the real causes of femicide? Why killing of women, especially, and girls? That is the main focus of this technical working group. And we also have gender-based recovery, centers across the country. And when I talk across the country, I'm talking about these are services that can be found within health facilities. The question is, are there structures, where these services are provided? These services are provided within the health facilities in Kenya. In each and every hospital, level 5 hospital, you can be able to find these services, and especially for survivors of sexual gender-based violence, whereby when the survivors are violated, they can go and get services, medical services, be it is treatment, on prevention of HIV, treatment, or prevention of STIs, and treatment related to sexual violence. These services, you can be able to find them there. And you'll find that the physical GBVRCs are found in Makueni County, Kilifi County, and Nairobi. The rest of the services you can be found within the health facilities. We have a Kenya Police Service, and the Kenya Police Service, one of the government agency, which is very key in as far as prevention and response to GBV is concerned. And that's why I'm saying that the Kenya Police are trained in each and every police station. The government has police officers or police officers that are trained on matters gender, such that when the survivors of GBV go to report issues on GBV, they can be, be attended accordingly. The officers are trained on gender matters or on GBV issues. So we have police desk in the police station for police desk officers for purposes of ensuring that the survivors get the right, treatment or get the right, they are able to report their issues appropriately. And whoever is handling them can be able to, to be very sensitive because he or she understands the matters on GBV and especially sexual gender-based violence.
Dr. let's
We also
time is a bit running. Please.
Okay. We also have the National Monitoring and Evaluation Framework towards prevention and response to sexual and gender-based violence. And this is a monitoring and evaluation framework. It is a broad guideline on how to assess the progress of prevention of and response to gender-based violence in Kenya. And it allows for multi-sector monitoring and evaluation on an online platform, accessible to all stakeholders through a technical working group. It is very important to know that those are the systems. And it's also important, I want to look at the skills. What are the skills that survivors need or survivors of GBV need to rebuild their lives? Because the moment they have gone through the experiences of GBV, they must have been thrown back, They are not able to progress. And when you look at the economic violence, you look at the, sexual violence, and any form of GBV, and they are thrown back. And I will look specifically at the FGM and FGM board that collaborates with the various partners to offer vocational training programs that teach survivors practical skills. Some of the skills can be tailoring, farming, and many, many others. That is the work of the board of and FGM. They do that. We also see the boards facilitates entrepreneurship trainings as well that enable survivors to start and manage their own businesses, equipping them with the right skills that they can be able to, to engage on something and move on with their lives, And we also have a significant aspect of policy, that is national policy on eradication of FGM. And that is survivors are often left with trauma, anxiety and depression, and feelings of isolation. And the police supports establishment of counseling centers and safe spaces where survivors can receive therapy and can be able to rebuild their lives thereafter. It is very important to know that this national policy on eradication of FGM, there is economic empowerment, which focuses on the policy. Survivors of FGM and GBV are supported through initiatives that provide livelihood support, such as grants, loans, and so on. So in trying to support survivors of GBV, it is very important for them to have the information that, and a lot of awareness has been created over and over to enable them to be able to access grants, loans, and so on, so that they can be able to have, economic independence and so on. We have women economic empowerment strategy as a country, whereby the goal of this strategy is to provide guidance and strategic direction to the statement for gender on how best to support women economic empowerment is, and it is very important for us to be aware that one of the areas of statement for gender that they work on is socio-economic empowerment of women and girls. And therefore, this is part of what the department does. And it is very important that the strategy contributes towards women empowerment, as it focuses on women's ability to gain access and control over productive resources and recognition as full economic actors. Women economic empowerment, therefore, seeks to address the challenges of poverty, inequality in governance, and inadequate skills to ensure that they achieve rapid and sustained growth to transform their lives. And having said that, it is very important for me to mention that State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action, as a lead agency, also have what we call referral pathways on how survivors of GBV can be able to report and be able to access justice. And for the State Department for Gender, the survivor can be able to report to the police, report to the hospital, report the issue, inform any community member about the violation, and be able to be guided on how to access health, health facility, how to access treatment, and how to report to police for further action to be taken, so that they can be able to access justice. Again, the State Department on Gender and Affirmative Action does not do this one alone. It uses what we call multi-sector approach to it, involving all stakeholders, state actors and non-state actors on this war against gender-based violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. That was really elaborate and long presentation. I think on behalf of our participants, I really request for the slides so that we can really go through it slowly and digest all the policies that Kenya has really put in place. And I can see some comments coming in talking of the policies that have really been adopted in Kenya and how they are ineffective in terms of implementation aspect. How best are they being implemented rather than just being documented and being put there to enable us know that there are policies to protect us. So that's well noted. Thank you so much for that presentation. I hope you've understood something, you've learned something, and really, we also have to appreciate what the government is doing. So Dr. Esther, we're looking forward to these slides so that I can share with the participants, and maybe you can just interact with the questions that are in the comment section. Yeah, there are a lot of questions there coming up. Thank you. You may stop sharing so that we have the brief discussion, 10 to 15 minutes. You really are sorry we've eaten into your time. Okay, so we're going to the last panelist, that is Dr. Aurelia Munene. Just take us through a brief presentation on how the multi-sectors can really collaborate and ensure that GBV issues are really taken into action, especially what researchers are doing, and this is the government, what they are doing, what exactly should be done. Kindly, if you can just take us like 15 minutes so that we can finalize this. Sorry, your time has been eaten prior.
Sorry for that.
Okay, thank you very much. As someone whose time has been eaten, as you're saying, no worries. I will just make it very brief. And my name is Aurelia. I work a lot on GBV issues, and I also work with an organization that carries out research on GBV, sexual reproductive health. So the focus of my, I'll skip a bit on the slides if you bear with me. The focus of my presentation really is to look at the multi-sectorial collaboration and how we can build our collective strength. And the question I was asked to respond to was how can multi-sectorial collaboration be strengthened to develop new linkages and enhance existing ones for improved uptake of GBV systems. So I focus on the strengthening. But before we deal with the strengthening, I thought it would be good to see where are we based on observation, based on studies, based on research that we have done, what kind of collaborations do we see are existing for GBV? So I will look at that. I'll look at this through some critical questions that I think we can think about, and of course not answer here. And then which areas can we think about collaborating? So multi-sectoral collaboration has many names, as you can see. It can be within disciplines, across sectors, within institutions. So I'm looking at that wide range of collaboration. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir. You know the value of multi-sectoral collaboration, why we need to collaborate. And I think the main reasons are because we have better access, we are able to mainstream interventions better, we are also able to be more accountable as we work at different levels, and we have better coordination, and we can get more accurate data. So the value of collaboration, and what is more complicated is how then do we collaborate? So I wanted to ask this question, but I will not ask it on chat now, but I wanted to ask, what challenges have you found in the current GBV collaborations? You maybe as an actor, what are you finding is the challenge in collaboration? You can put on chat, but we do not have a lot of time to go into that. So what happens then when multi-sectoral collaborations are weak? We have seen what happens if they're weak. They're there, but they're weak. One, we heighten the risk of survivor re-traumatization. We have spoken about that. And also the risk of backlash. The other thing that happens when these systems, these collaborations do not work, we have very fragmented, inefficient service delivery. So we have duplication. Everyone is doing awareness. Then the other services which are left out. We have inconsistent, interrupted support. So a survivor starts very well with the healthcare, but then on the other service that they need are all interrupted. They're not consistent. So then we have very weak referral and service delivery gaps. The other thing that happens when multi-sectoral collaborations are weak is weak accountability. So we don't have enough information. We don't know who to hold in account. We don't know who dropped the ball. And then all of us then now congregate and say it is not working. So that weak accountability is really enhanced when multi-sectoral collaborations are weak. We also have wasted resources. We are in a continent where resources are very few. And if our collaborations have a lot of seepages where we can't account for what resources we have reduced data sharing, then it becomes a very wasteful process. And of course, the constraint on prevention because we don't have a coordinated way of prevention. So it's good to have collaboration, but I think it is worse to have bad collaboration. And I think that's why we need to constantly reflect if the collaborations we are having are really enhancing or really making GBV response more complicated. The reason why it's important, I think, we think about collaboration vertically is because of the nature of violation that we are addressing. What violation are we collaborating to address? And it's GBV, a very complicated violation where the people we want to serve are very invisible. They walk among us, but we don't know them. It is not like someone who's been shot. We can all tell them, please go to hospital. There's a hospital here. We stay with survivors in our homes, in our families, and they remain invisible. So we have to have systems that enable them, as most of you have said, to reach out to care when as they feel safe, or as they feel they will not be discriminated on. The crime also we are talking about is very silent and difficult to report. It is rooted in power inequalities. So it means that even if people know that you are struggling, there are certain, or you are being violated, this violation is often justified through gender norms, through stereotypes, through sanctions. And that's why people can see you're hurting, but they have a lot of ways to justify why you need to stay there and why you cannot report. So also GBV intersects with a lot of oppression and discrimination, so making it very complicated to address. It also, survivors face a lot of discrimination, and it has many devastating impacts, not just for the individual, but for the family and the community. And it rarely comes alone. You might be facing domestic violence, and within the line of your life, you might face sexual violence. So it's a very complicated a violation that when we think about collaboration, we have to think about its complexity. I think about gender-based violence through the lens, the theory of Galtan, and it talks about which sometimes can give a bit of depth in how we look at it. I think most of you already know it as we are in GBV, where what we see that is fueling the violation are two types of violence. One is the cultural violence, which is the norms, which is the beliefs, the stereotypes, but then the structural violence, systems placed on people, the inequality, the ideologies that promote inequalities, that make people vulnerable, that drive poverty, multidimensional poverty, that lead to access in education. And I think when we are analyzing collaboration, we then have to think, if GBV is fueled by cultural violence and structural violence, which actors need to come in this conversation so that we can tackle it, both the visible and the invisible drivers of GBV. Of course, these are the risk factors of GBV that when we think about collaboration, we think about who needs to be at the table when we are thinking about risk factors and protective factors as well. So I'll not go into this, but just thinking about GBV and what most of you have said, the one thing that constantly is on our minds is the excruciating survival. We have two choices.
Aurelia, I don't know if it's my network. We can't hear you.
Our network is
You
Yeah,
are
we can get
breaking. Yeah. I think she dropped. Okay, I think she dropped. Meanwhile, as we wait for her, Dr. you can probably start looking at some questions that are in the comment section. There are a lot of questions that have been put there in comments, and you can just interact with them. Aurelia, if you can hear us, is she back? Okay. Probably she's good. Okay, there's some hiccup with these online things. Maybe I'll just skip to the Q&A session briefly before we finalize this webinar as we wait for her to just finalize. I think the presentation was almost over. So I'll just go through some few comments that have been put in place. Looking at Valerie. Valerie, if you can just unmute and just elaborate your comments and also your question. Over to you, Valerie. And also kindly, in case you join with the link that I shared, you're coming as Lavender, kindly just rename yourself so that I can know who is talking and who is asking a question.
Hey, hello.
Hello, Valerie, go ahead.
Oh, so okay, so basically what I was just saying was that I feel like survivors of GVB, they do require the physical safe spaces, yeah. So not like the theoretical frameworks, because I feel like in Kenya we do a lot of policies and not actually implementing these policies. You see, so I feel like the absence of government constructed shelters means that the survivors, they're often like they're forced to return to their abusive environment, or even rely on the overstretched efforts of the NGOs and or maybe the community organizations. So this actually raises the question if we really recognize the need for, if we really recognize the need for the safe spaces enough to create guidelines for it. Why hasn't the government built any? You see, and so protection, I feel like it goes beyond the paperwork. Like the government must really allocate resources to construct and sustain these safe spaces, ensuring that they are accessible in both urban and even the rural areas. So because the survivors deserve more than just a well-written policy. Yeah, so that's really the point I was trying to bring about. And so I feel like if we're really serious about tackling GBV in Kenya, we need to move from how things should be to how things will be done. And so I wanted to ask this one particular to the ministry. I don't remember her name, but so I'm just gonna throw it in there. What are the immediate steps that the ministry is taking to ensure that these guidelines actually translate into action? Because from her presentation, there are something that happened on 10th of January. Yeah? And so, from that point, what else are we going to do? What else is the government putting in place so that us as women and actually everyone that is experiencing GBV can actually rely on their government for the support? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Dr. Esther, would you love to address that?
Let me address it a bit about what with regard to what happened on 10th of January this year, right?
Right.
And the government came up with a technical working group. And this technical working group was necessitated by the increase, or alarming increase of femicide in Kenya. And this technical working group is supposed to work for 90 days. That is around 3 months. to come up with a report. This report should, for example, have what are the, the root causes. What is the root cause or the root causes of femicide as an GBV? How is the prevalence of femicide in Kenya? It also has to have something to do with the trend. And what are the, mental issues that result or come as a result of, GBV as a whole. I am saying that because government works with frameworks. That's why I was, putting forward the systems that government works with. The concomitation of GBV prevalence in Kenya every year, same time. So far, the government has not been able to come up with the GBV protection center. This is because the protection center and the services that are offered to those protection centers have to be anchored on a legal framework. And to have it digitally like this, it means that there's a framework as to how all the services are going to be offered based on that particular law. Having said that, 2023, the government was able to come up with an executive order, number 2, whereby it gave the State Department for Gender the mandate to establish GBV protection centers or protection centers for violence. It is a process. It cannot be, waking up and coming up with it. The process, where is the framework, where are the regulations, it is known for sure that it is going to be domiciled under the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. It's the department that leads or takes lead on issues gender, on gender-based harassment. Therefore, we may talk of where is the physical protection center? Where are the safe spaces? Why the guidelines and why is they taken this long? The guidelines are there to, to guide already those that are there. The safe spaces that are there, they have the direction on how or what they should offer in those safe spaces. What kind of services they should offer, the quality they should offer. There are guidelines. Just imagine without those guidelines, how it would look like. Everybody will have his own and operate it the way he or she feels like. But this is different. As a department that coordinates matters, GBV, the guidelines are there. For those who are able to offer those services to be able to follow that quality service. However, it is very important also for us to know that having those guidelines does not mean that the ministry has the safe spaces. It is offering those guidelines for those who have the safe spaces can be able to offer those services to the survivors. And in fact, that is a more sectoral approach for the government. They collaborated that with the organization that have such spaces on GBV survivors. So it is not that they are operating on their own so that they do what they want, no? They have to be guided. They have to be regulated, It is very important. So they are very key, those guidelines. the legal framework is also very key, as the process has been initiated to come up with one. Yes. And to add on that, there are some resources that were dedicated for establishment of GBV protection centers. So that is what we are looking at. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Valerie. I hope you've been answered. The government has really worked on, they're really putting in place the various frameworks and also the laws and the legal frameworks that have been put in place just to protect the people. Probably the problem is coming under the implementation aspect, where we're talking of lacking a culture or center that can really showcase that these things are really working, and the government is actually working on that. So probably as researchers or as people who are trying to advocate for this issue to be dealt with in Kenya, we can really do a follow-up on that and ensure that collaboratively we develop these these aspects, these actions, and also ensure that everyone benefits from them. Valerie, I hope you well answered. I hope she is. Irelia, kindly just finalize the presentation, then we have Kanyangi giving us a synthesis and we close this meeting. Irelia, over to you.
Okay, I sincerely apologize. So I will just go to how we can strengthen. I apologize for that. So let me just say, one of the things about multi-sectoral collaborations is that they can promote a collective approach to GBV response, but they're also political processes that have a lot of negotiations as people come together. They're also not neutral. They have different interests, and all these has to be taken in collaboration. How do we manage the different interests of different actors as they come to collaborate on GBV? And these are some of the issues that I wanted to share with. One, it's constantly reflecting as someone who is responding on GBV issues, being very reflexive. Why am I in this space? What am I constantly doing? And reconnecting with ourselves. Because one of the things when working on very difficult topics, sometimes we disconnect so that we can be there for other people. But that disconnection does not allow us to show up completely in this collaboration. Also, communities are often seen as the objects of care, but they are the core when it comes to collaboration. We have different community groups that are doing a lot of work, but oftentimes their voice is silenced and they are told, we are here to teach you. But voices of the communities, they are the ones living where these norms are, where this cultural violence is, the structure of violence is. They have something to say. Also, I feel that there needs to be a very critical and rigorous GBV analysis. Oftentimes, GBV is lumped together. The way you'd analyze the drivers of intimate partner violence, how you'd analyze trafficking would not be the same. And most of the time, when we lump GBV together, then we lose the nuance. We are not able to effectively, what is the driver? What are the effects? How do they manifest? Who are the perpetrators? So one of the ways that is being pushed now is to do participatory GBV research. Let you sit with communities and design the GBV research that you want to do. Otherwise, if you design it in your office, take it to them, there is no ownership. But these days we are pushing for a participatory approach. Let them inform you the methodology. Let them tell you this is who we can speak to, this is who we can't now, so that they are part of process of producing that data. Also, we have to improve our cultural competence. When we work in certain communities that we are not very aware of their cultural behaviors, oftentimes we just say, those people have cultural behaviors we don't understand. Let us improve. Who are these communities I'm working with? What is their history? How has culture changed the gender norms in this context? So that we have a very clear understanding when we are collaborating, what we are actually doing. Then finally, we have to reconnect with survivors. Oftentimes when I speak to communities, they say, those are NGOs, this is us. This us and them dynamic brings the thing that we seem not to be connected with the people we are working with. The languages we use, calling people targets, calling people beneficiaries, all these languages disconnect us from the very population, and therefore they cannot help us collaborate. The approach we also push a lot, even for my own organization, is the asset-based approaches to development, starting not with what don't people have, starting with what do you have that we can actually enhance. If it is GBV, how are you already protecting and preventing GBV in your community? Who is protecting? Who is preventing? How can we start? But oftentimes, I think the development space, we start with lack. And because we start with lack, we don't know what is existing. And sometimes we can even disrupt what was existing and protecting. Then also giving time for deep work to do critical analysis, to do deep debates, because oftentimes the NGO world, it's like people are on a marathon. You're constantly on a marathon and you never pause to ask, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I in this collaboration? What am I actually doing? Also, institutional audits, making sure that we are reviewing our approaches. Where is most of our money in the GBV budgets going? Is it in seminars? Is it in conferences? Then when survivors say we don't have transport, then there is no money for transport. Let us review our GBV budgets. Where is most of our monies going? And I think the NGO world has been critiqued for too much capacity building and very little on the actual needs that people want. Let us rethink our budgets as well. What are the funding priorities? What is being funded the least? Most of the time, coordination is not funded. There is an assumption that people will just collaborate, but sometimes it's not. It has to be intentional. It has to also have resources. Governance matters. If we have governance systems that are full of corruption, and that's the reality, we have to speak the truth, then we will not make it. We will not have systems at work. So I think even for us as GBV actors, we have to be involved in the governance matters of the country, because if money is not allocated for a particular service, yet it is in a policy, then we cannot work. So I think governance systems, even in our own NGOs, have to be transparent and accountable. And then finally, we have to align our priorities. The funder priorities and the country priorities have to be in sync, because there is what the country wants to do, there is what the funder wants to do. We have to meet somewhere. And sometimes I feel the country priorities have to take the first step. They have to take the first priority, because that's the country that knows what it wants. So let the funders also be more flexible to really fund what people really want, not what they want. And then sometimes people feel that we are still not getting where we wanted. So ladies and gentlemen, that is, I had some critical questions, which I thought would be very good, but I will not go into those. I just want to say that we have a great opportunity to collaborate in GBV, but I feel we have to rethink our collaboration. We have to look at them very critically, address who is being silenced, whose voice is always heard, who's being left out, so that then we can have more equitable partnerships that actually work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. I think the network was misbehaving because we really needed to hear that last part of it. We really need to think of the type of collaboration that we have and all the actors that are involved in this sector, from the government, from the researchers, from the grassroots community. We really need to come together in order to make noise and really raise our voice on the issues of GBV as a team. Thank you so much for that really good presentation, and we're looking forward to having these conversations scaled up and even maybe involving government in physical meetings rather than just these webinars. Thank you, and thank you so much. At this point, I think time is much spent. I don't know if someone has a question. I can see Dr. Jared asking, can we have alternative dynamic to NGBV and FGM apart from law enforcement? And all that I can say is from Ms. Munene's presentation, I think that is really answered. Or Aurelia, do you want to answer that before we finalize this?
I can say that alternative to the police, because already we have laws that have criminalized GBV,
Yeah.
then I think that may not happen, because we have laws that says if you've done this, then, but we can also have a conversation with communities around this, because also punishments and enforcement of laws these people are from the community. It's not to excuse the perpetrators, but also to have that conversation of this is what the law says, how can we uphold it, what is the challenge and all that. But I think, yeah, we cannot really do away with the law
The laws.
enforcement as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Jared, I hope that's really helpful. That answer is really well answered. Okay, I'll welcome Washington Kanyangi. Washington is a research associate at ARIN. Just give us key synthesis of this webinar and probably just finalize it by giving us a strong closing remarks. Kanyangi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I will merge the two, the synthesis as well as the closing remarks. I was listening keenly to our speakers, Miss Anna, Dr. Esther, as well as Miss Aurelia. Those were they were eye-opening remarks, if I may say so, and from our discussions, on the topic of on the status of GBV and its far-reaching impacts, it is evident that while strong legal frameworks exist, the gap in their implementation remains a significant challenge. Beyond enforcement, we must recognize that GBV has been deeply normalized in various societal settings, calling for a contextualized and evidence-based approach to interventions. What works in urban or cosmopolitan areas may not be as effective in more traditional societies, where social norms and structures shape the acceptance or rejection of GBV-related policies. So this necessitates actually that rethinking how we engage duty bearers, health providers, etc., not just as enforcers of laws, but as key stakeholders in driving cultural change, which is pivotal for this particular cause. We must integrate them into sensitization and training programs, raise champions among them, and ensure they internalize that GBV is a fundamental violation of human rights and against the well-being of the victims. At the same time, empowering communities is crucial. So grassroots champions must be mobilized to challenge harmful norms such as FGM and sustain efforts at the local level. Sustainability and effectiveness should be at the heart of all interventions. How do we ensure that these GBV interventions have a long-term impact? That question should be at the center of each and every conceptualization of GBV interventions. And just thinking of Ms. Anna's case study, socio-economic intervention must be prioritized to prevent vulnerability and untangle barriers to justice. This includes the prohibitive costs of legal processes, as well as advocating for budgetary allocations from the national and local governments towards gender-based violence. Ms. Aurelia's illustration of visible and invisible drivers of GBV is intriguing. These are the nitty-gritties that tailored GBV interventions, should consider in order to ensure, number one, accountability, sustainability, effectiveness, and continuity of the interventions in respective communities. Her reflections on participatory gender-based research is very critical, and that is amplifying the vulnerable communities' voices in critical in generating actually evidence as well as contextualized interventions. Ultimately, the question we must grapple with is Ms. Anna's question, whereby she stated, do we fix women and girls, or do we fix institutions meant to protect them? I believe while empowering survivors is essential, the real transformation lies in strengthening institutions, dismantling systemic barriers, and ensuring that GBV is neither tolerated or normalized in any setting. Then the most important aspect of GBV is a robust monitoring and evaluation framework on the effectiveness of various GBV interventions and what kinds of indicators can we co-create with vulnerable populations or demographics in respective African contexts to inform the progress of respective interventions against gender-based violence. I'll just finish by just saying that as the UN Women Executive Director once said, I believe she goes by the name Sima. She stated that ending gender-based violence is not just about changing laws, it's about changing lives. It requires unwavering commitment, investment, very key, and a united global effort. So let today's discussion translate into concrete actions, just as Ms. Munene said, that let us have concrete actions in safeguarding dignity, upholding human rights, and creating a safer and more just society for all. Yep, I'll just end there. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Washington. Thank you so much for that. That is really, those key messages or those key takeaway home messages are really critical, and we also need to look into that collectively. Thank you so much, Washington. I think we've taken something home. I think we've managed to gather something. So always know that the sustainability and effectiveness of all issues are at the heart of every intervention that you are trying to put in place, be it in adaptation, be it in GBV or FGM and all that. So we should look at how effective are they and how sustainable are really they. And also, monitoring and evaluation is coming in strongly. The robust monitoring and evaluation frameworks needs to be put in place to monitor how these effectiveness are being achieved and how sustainable this thing are or is. All right. Thank you so much, Kanyangi. Thank you so much, our amazing speakers that we had today. At this point, before I just finalize it, I'll just request if you can just turn on our cameras in case you are comfortable or in a position to. And Nancy from Arene, kindly just help us take the final group photo as we end this very candid and crucial discussion today. And as LIPS team, I am a research assistant and I help in the, before I say anything, I can see Violet. Violet, probably just give us the last vote of thanks under the LIPS program. That's thanks our speakers, yeah.
Thank you, Lavender. I don't have much to say because I wasn't ready to say anything, but yes, this This webinar is a part of some of the activities that we're running under the LEAPS project, which was introduced earlier when the webinar began. So great topic. Thanks to the speakers who came on. Thanks to the government of Kenya for your presentation as well. And your, I didn't know we have so many frameworks that guide this issue. I think now the issue is around implementation. I appreciate the spirit of multi-sectoral approach that the government has. But I think as the other speaker who presented about collaboration, we need to think about how that can work better and be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy, over to you.
Yes, Lavena, thank you. If we can have more participants turn on their cameras to take a few more screenshots.
Please, let's turn on cameras.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I've managed to take a couple.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. Thank you so much, team. This is really appreciated. Dr. Esther, Dr. Aurelia, Dr. Akinyi, everyone, thank you so much for this, making time to spare with us and be here to this time. We really appreciate this. May you have a fantastic weekend ahead and may God bless you. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.